Well, shit. There goes another one, Rake Thalor muttered, watching the latest cargo freighter become one with the sun. If you could call exploding into a billion pieces, becoming one. The rogue planet they called home, or at least the closest thing to it, was skirting the edge of its parabolic death dive toward the star, and it seemed inclined to take everyone else down with it. In the cockpit of the, ever so slightly reliable, Rake fiddled with the controls, which were just as unreliable as the ship's name suggested. Ever so slightly reliable was a generous description, akin to calling a cracked oxygen tanker, potential air source. But here in the last bastion of humanity's trade empire, optimism and desperation went hand in hand like old drinking buddies. Rake, you realize we can't keep losing ships like this, came the voice of Drecker, his first mate, from behind a console that looked more like a mass of wiring than anything that belonged on a spaceship. Drecker was the kind of man who'd find a problem in a solution, just to keep things interesting. Rake grinned at him like a man who'd just been told the end of the world was nigh, but hey, free drinks. Oh, really? I was thinking maybe there's a secret level of freighter we unlock after losing 10. You know, like a video game. Drecker squinted at him, the lines on his face deepening in a way only constant stress could manage. If I wanted video games, I'd go back to the Terran archives where the world still made sense. Rake just shrugged. Sense is overrated. Look at us. We're trading with aliens who think a handshake is a mating ritual. Drecker snorted, and speaking of our esteemed guests, he gestured toward the ship's hold where Drul Khan, the alien economist, was presumably trying to make heads or tails of human economics, a task about as straightforward as interpreting a Jackson Pollock painting while drunk. Drul Khan, meanwhile, was peering at a holoscreen displaying human trade metrics, his four eyes oscillating between confusion and a sort of resigned amusement. He was what humans might call ugly cute, with scales that shimmered like a disco ball at a defunct club. Your trade, Drul Khan said, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk, is, how do I say this, peculiar. That's putting it mildly, Drecker chimed in, crossing his arms. You trying to write a book about us or something? Drul Khan's eyelids blinked in sequence, a gesture that might have approximated a human sigh if he had possessed lungs. Something like that. My superiors are curious about how your trade empire has lasted this long given. He gestured vaguely to the screen, the numbers a swirling chaos of red and yellow indicating debts, losses, and a scandalous number of missing ships. Human ingenuity, Rake said, leaning back in his chair, which groaned ominously. Or maybe we're just too stupid to quit. He chuckled darkly. Besides, everyone loves a good underdog story, right? Drecker rolled his eyes. That's if you ignore the part where the dog gets kicked to death at the end. Drul Khan tapped a claw against the screen. And this constant proximity to your star, does it not bother you? Rake shrugged, a motion he'd gotten good at given the sheer volume of, oh well, situations they found themselves in. We like to live dangerously. Add spice to the otherwise bland routine of existential dread. Drul Khan tilted his head, a gesture that would have been curious if not for the predatory edge of his gaze. Intriguing. And what of your plans for the future? Rake didn't miss a beat. Well, once we've burned through what little remains of our fleets, we're thinking of starting a theme park. Big attractions. Maybe we could call it the Sunburn Experience. Real hotspot for tourists. Drecker snorted. Could even charge extra for the afterlife experience. Drul Khan's eyes widened a fraction, perhaps appreciating the human penchant for turning certain death into a punchline. Fascinating. And your trade strategies? They seem unusual. That's a polite way to put it, Rake said. But look, it's like this. You got what people want, people give you what you want. It's like magic, only more disappointing. Drul Khan pondered this, and the constant losses, he searched for the right word, discrepancies in your accounts. Rake laughed, a sharp bark that echoed off the metal walls of the cockpit. Ah, we call that creative accounting. Also known as making shit up. This seemed to amuse Drul Khan more than it should have, perhaps because alien cultures rarely encountered such brazen dishonesty paired with a complete lack of shame. Your honesty is refreshing, Drul Khan admitted, his scales reflecting a spectrum of light that would have been beautiful if anyone cared to notice, which they didn't. Rake shrugged again. Well, we've got nothing to hide. Except maybe our plans to overthrow the universe, but hey, that's a work in progress. Drecker chuckled. Yeah, step 1, survive the week. Step 2, world domination. Easy peasy. Drul Khan was about to say something when the ship lurched violently, a familiar screech echoing through the hull. A sound that usually signified impending doom, but had become so commonplace it was practically background music at this point. Rake swore under his breath. What now? Looks like we're caught in the star's gravity well, Drecker said, his hands flying over the controls with a speed that suggested he was more practiced at averting disaster than anything else. Rake grinned, that wild, unhinged expression that made you question whether he was brave or just suicidally idiotic. See, just another day in paradise. Tweak the thrusters, will you? Drecker glared at him but obeyed, punching in commands that might possibly keep them from becoming space dust. One of these days, Rake, one of these days. But not today, Rake barked, holding onto his chair as if it were the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. Drul Khan observed the frantic activity with what could only be described as admiration. Your resilience is remarkable, he said, as if noting the weather. Rake grinned. Well, you know what they say. What doesn't kill you makes you weirder. The ship shuddered, lights flickering ominously, and for a moment it seemed like they might actually make it, but then a panel exploded, showering them with sparks. Drecker cursed. We're cooked. Rake laughed, a mad cackle of a man staring down his own mortality. Not yet, we're not. With a few deft moves that spoke of experience and desperation, Rake managed to stabilize their trajectory, the ship pulling away from the star's deadly embrace just in time. Drul Khan seemed impressed. You truly are a fascinating species. Rake, still panting from the ordeal, gave a casual salute. Stick around, you might learn something. Or at least get a good laugh out of it. Drecker was less amused. I swear, Rake, if we survive this, I'm retiring to a nice, quiet black hole. Rake clapped him on the back. Don't worry, old friend. We'll survive. We always do. And if not, well, at least we'll die laughing. Drul Khan tilted his head again, that alien curiosity piqued. Your acceptance of mortality is unusual. Rake spread his arms wide, as if to embrace the chaos of the universe. Life's a joke, Drul Khan. Might as well be in on the punchline. Drecker took a deep breath, steadying himself. Next time, let's avoid the punchline that gets us killed. Agreed, Drul Khan added, though I must say, your approach is captivating. Stick with us, Drill, Rake said with a wink. You'll be writing a bestseller about us in no time. Title it, How Humans Defy Economic Sense and Survive Anyway. Catchy, huh? Drecker groaned but couldn't help the small smile that tugged at his lips. The truth was, despite the madness, he wouldn't have it any other way. The ship hummed along, a precarious lifeline in a universe intent on annihilating him, but that was part of the charm. Rake, Drecker, and their unlikely companion Drul Khan continued their improbable journey, each day a testament to human stubbornness and a reminder that sometimes the best stories were the ones where you didn't know the ending. And as they drifted further from the sun's grasp, Rake couldn't shake the feeling they were on the edge of something monumental, or possibly catastrophic. But really, what was the difference? End of the world or not, Rake said, leaning back into his chair, I wouldn't miss it for anything. The universe, vast and indifferent, waited just beyond the hull, offering nothing but uncertainty and, if they were lucky, a chance to keep laughing in the face of it all. Rake Thalor cursed under his breath as he stared at the flickering console. I swear, this ship has a mind of its own, and it's definitely not working with us, he muttered, slamming a fist onto the control panel. If this piece of junk keeps acting up, we'll be trading with aliens for spare parts instead of whatever it is they're actually interested in. Drecker, his ever-reliable first mate, eyed him from the corner of the cockpit, where he'd been busy trying to untangle a mess of wires that seemed to breed like rabbits on the ever-so-slightly reliable. You know, Rake, every time you hit that thing, I feel like you're just encouraging it. Negative reinforcement only works if you're not dealing with an inanimate object. Thanks for the psychology lesson, Doc, Rake shot back, eyes glued to the console like it might spontaneously combust. But unless you've got a degree in ancient Terran engineering, I'm going to keep hitting it until it listens. Drul Khan, the alien economist and the ship's resident chronicler of human nonsense, looked up from his spot in the corner where he was surrounded by data pads displaying human trade metrics, all of which looked like they were having a midlife crisis. His four eyes blinked in succession, a rhythm that suggested he was trying to comprehend the concept of fixing things by hitting them. Your methods are unorthodox, Drul Khan said, his gravelly voice carrying an undercurrent of curiosity. Does violence typically solve your mechanical problems? Rake shrugged, a gesture he'd perfected to imply either supreme confidence or complete helplessness. Depends on the machine. Some respond better to a gentle touch. This ship, though, it's more of a rough and tumble kind of lady. Drecker snorted, his face contorted into a wry grin. Lady, this pile of bolts is an insult to scrap heaps everywhere. Rake waved a dismissive hand. Details, details. The important thing is, can she fly? Barely, Drecker said, managing to look simultaneously exasperated and amused. If we run into one more solar storm, we'll be flying backwards. Drul Khan tapped a claw on one of the data pads, drawing their attention away from the impending mechanical failure. I have been attempting to understand your trade routes, he said, as if trying to decipher a particularly challenging puzzle. Your resource management appears lacking. Lacking? Rake echoed, feigning offense. I'll have you know our fuel reserves have only been redlined twice this week. And that's an improvement, Drecker added dryly, giving Rake a sideways glance. Last week we were burning fumes and optimism. Drulkan's scales shimmered in a manner that suggested he was both perplexed and intrigued. Your barter system is quite baffling. You trade valuable resources for what seems like trivial items. Trivial? Rake raised an eyebrow, leaning back in his chair as though he were about to tell a grand tale. You call vintage Terran comic books trivial? My friend, those are cultural artifacts. Drecker shook his head, clearly enjoying the exchange despite himself. Artifacts, sure, if that culture was based entirely on implausible plots and spandex. Rake shot him a look. Says the man who traded half our rations for a collection of rubber ducks. That was for morale, Drecker said defensively. Nothing boosts crew spirits like a good bath time companion. Drulkan blinked his eyes in sequence, as if recalibrating his understanding of human psychology. I see, I think, your economic practices are indeed peculiar. Rake gave a half grin. It's all about the market, Drill. One man's trash is another man's morale booster. Or another alien's conundrum, Drulkan murmured, making a note on his datapad. The ship gave a shudder, and the lights flickered ominously. Rake glanced at the controls, then at Drecker. Status. Drecker was already on it, his fingers dancing over the console with practiced ease. Solar activity's picking up. We might have to reroute again if it gets any worse. Great, Rake muttered, as if our fuel reserves weren't strained enough. Drulkan looked from one human to the other, his predator-like gaze not missing anything. Your situation seems precarious. Is this normal? Normal. Rake laughed, a sound that echoed off the metallic walls. Normal went out the airlock long ago. Now we just aim for, not dead. Drecker nodded, his expression one of resigned acceptance. You get used to living on the edge when the edge is all you've got left. Drulkan considered this, clearly still trying to wrap his head around the human penchant for chaos. And you see this as sustainable? Depends on how you define sustainable, Rake said, shrugging again. If you mean surviving day to day while staring down inevitable doom, then yeah, we're thriving. But our thriving, Drecker added, is your teetering on the brink of annihilation. You'll learn the distinction eventually. The ship rocked again, as though the universe was making sure they didn't forget just how precarious their situation was. Rake let out a long-suffering sigh. We need a new plan. Suggestions? Drecker tapped his chin, contemplating their options with a level of seriousness that was rare in their line of work. We could try bypassing the stronger solar winds. It'll take us off course, but at least we won't get fried. Rake nodded slowly. And the downside? Fuel, Drecker replied, the single word carrying more weight than a full-blown lecture on the principles of thermodynamics. Right, Rake said, rubbing his temples. Can't trade if we're out of gas. Drulkan, any ideas? The alien economist seemed to consider this for a moment, his eyes flicking between the humans and his datapads. Perhaps I could negotiate with some of my contacts for supplies. Your eccentricities might be of interest. Rake's eyes lit up with a mixture of hope and skepticism. You think they'd go for it? Drulkan's version of a shrug was a ripple across his scales. It's possible, but I must warn you, our trade practices are rather conventional. Drecker chuckled. Conventional, huh? Well, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Rake grinned, that wild spark in his eyes that suggested he might have once been charming if he wasn't so frequently staring death in the face. Let's do it. What's the worst that could happen? Drulkan's eyes narrowed slightly, as if weighing the odds. In your case, I believe, the worst might be an understatement. Rake clapped him on the back. Welcome to the club, Drill. We specialize in understatements. The ship continued its shuddering dance through the cosmos, a graceless waltz that spoke to its continued determination to complicate their lives. But Rake, Drecker, and Drulkan soldiered on, each in their own way resigned to the madness, yet somehow finding humor in the futility of it all. As they plotted their new course, Rake couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with his alien companion. Sure, Drulkan didn't understand human economics, and frankly, they didn't either. But just maybe, by embracing their collective confusion, they'd find a way to keep this bucket of bolts flying for another day. All right, gentlemen, Rake declared, leaning back with a smirk that reeked of misplaced confidence. Let's go make history. Or repeat it, Drecker added wryly, his fingers still dancing over the controls in a desperate bid to maintain order. Drulkan inclined his head, the gesture almost regal if you squinted and ignored the fact that he might also be contemplating their inevitable demise. To history, then, however peculiar it might be. With the course set and the odds stacked against them, the ever so slightly reliable continued its journey across the stars, a testament to the resilience of its crew and their willingness to laugh in the face of disaster. Because if you couldn't find humor in cosmic calamity, what was the point of it all? Rake Thalor leaned back in his chair, the motion creaking louder than his ship's failing integrity. Alright, let's start talking currency. We've got solar winds breathing down our necks, and not much left in the reserves to outrun them. Drecker shot him a look, half amused and half annoyed, a combination he'd mastered over years of dealing with Rake's genius. Currency, in case you didn't notice, Captain, we don't exactly have gold bars stashed away in the cargo hold. That's because we traded them for those morale-enhancing rubber ducks, remember? Rake remarked, smirking. Best deal I ever made, Drecker replied dryly, his fingers still dancing over the console like a pianist improvising in a burning theater. Drulkhan watched the exchange with the kind of fascination a scientist might reserve for a particularly perplexing species. You humans are an enigma, he rasped, his gaze emphasizing the last word like it was an unpaid tab. You speak of trade, yet your concept of value is abstract. Rake chuckled, leaning forward with a gleam in his eye that suggested he was about to pull a rabbit from a hat, or at least something equally improbable. Hope and loyalty, those are commodities, my friend. Immeasurable, sure, but believe me, they're worth their weight in whatever passes for gold in this quadrant. Drulkhan blinked all four eyes in succession, his alien mind struggling to quantify the unquantifiable. Hope, loyalty, these are not units of trade. Tell that to a desperate crew on a dying ship, Rake countered, his smile the kind that dared the universe to disagree. Hope's our bread and butter. Keeps us going when the fuel gauge doesn't. Drecker snorted, giving Rake a sidelong glance. And loyalty, that's just the glue holding this ragtag band of misfits together. Without it, we'd be space dust. Drulkhan tapped a datapad, his claws clicking a rhythm that suggested both intrigue and exasperation. Such intangibles are challenging to transcribe into economic models. Welcome to the human economy, Rake said, spreading his arms wide like a ringmaster introducing the main attraction. We're the masters of the make-believe. The ship groaned in response, as if protesting Rake's hubris, or maybe just reminding him all that its complaints hadn't been resolved. The lights flickered in a temperamental display of solidarity with their captain's bravado. All right, Drecker said, shifting his focus back on the rudimentary controls. We need a practical solution. Unless you've got some hope in liquid form, we're going to need a miracle. Rake scratched his chin, a gesture that suggested he was deep in thought or, more likely, stalling for time. What about those contacts of Drulkhan's? The alien economist sighed, the kind of sound that suggested centuries of accumulated patience finally being tested. My contacts may be open to negotiations, but they require tangible assurances. Great, Rake said, clapping his hands together. We'll give them the one thing we've got in spades, our trademark human charm. Drecker rolled his eyes. Right, because charm's an all-access pass to every interstellar exchange. You'd be surprised, Rake replied, standing up with a flourish that managed to be both theatrical and ridiculous. How do you think we've lasted this long? Luck, Drecker suggested, deadpan. Delusion, Drulkhan added, his alien features managing to convey an almost human sense of sarcasm. Rake turned to Drulkhan with a grin. See, you're getting the hang of it. Next thing you know, you'll be trading hope and loyalty with the best of us. Drulkhan's eyes narrowed, a flicker of calculated curiosity beneath his near-constant bewilderment. Might such trade actually yield results? Absolutely not, Drecker said, crossing his arms with the conviction of a man who had lived through one too many of Rake's schemes. Hey, Rake protested, looking mock offended. I've pulled off crazier things. Like that time you tried to barter peace with a smile and a handshake. Drecker shot back, an eyebrow raised. Rake waved him off, the memory apparently too embarrassing to relive. Details. Anyway, Drill, you got anything concrete your pals might like? Drulkhan considered this for a moment, his gaze drifting back to his datapads. Perhaps an exchange of knowledge. Some find human innovation intriguing. Because who wouldn't want to learn the secrets of duct tape engineering? Drecker mused, his sarcasm carrying the weight of bitter experience. Hey, duct tape's kept us alive more than once, Rake defended, pointing a finger. It's practically a holy relic. Drulkhan tilted his head, the gesture alien yet oddly familiar. If knowledge is indeed valued, I may be able to arrange something. Rake clapped the alien on the back, causing Drulkhan to jolt slightly. That's the spirit. Let's teach them what humans do best, improvise and survive. Meanwhile, the ship continued its not-so-graceful dance through the void, creaking and lurching like a drunken sailor finding his sea legs. Drecker glanced at the controls, then back at Rake. You do realize if this doesn't work, we're royally screwed. With a cherry on top, Rake acknowledged, unfazed. But what's life without a little risk? Drulkhan's alien eyes narrowed, perhaps in contemplation or sheer disbelief at human audacity. Your species thrives on uncertainty. Uncertainty keeps things interesting, Rake replied with a wink. It's when things get certain that you start worrying about the Reaper. Drekker shook his head, but there was a glint of amusement in his eyes. Well, here's to uncertainty. May it keep us afloat a little while longer. Cheers to that, Rake agreed, raising an imaginary glass. And to hope and loyalty, our unofficial sponsors. Drulkhan watched the exchange, making a note on his datapad. Perhaps he was logging the transaction value of human bravado. If he was lucky, maybe he'd figure out how to market it. As the ever so slightly reliable drifted through the celestial currents, the crew continued their dance with disaster, buoyed by the very intangibles that kept them alive. Hope, loyalty, and a stubborn refusal to admit defeat, these were the real engines driving them forward. And as the ship groaned and shuddered, it almost seemed to agree. As the ever so slightly reliable stumbled through the void like a drunk at last call, Rake Thalor leaned over the comms panel, a glint of mischief in his eyes. He was the kind of man who could find opportunity in a black hole, or at least pretend he could until it spit him out the other side. Drekker, how's our artistic collection coming along? Drekker, who was doing his best impression of a multitasking octopus at the console, flicked a switch with one hand while swatting at a loose wire with the other. You mean the doodles, or those portraits of past crew members we keep around as motivation to survive? Both, Rake said with a grin that suggested he might actually be onto something, for once. You can't be serious, Drekker replied, shooting him a look that screamed disbelief. You're banking on artistic expressions to pull us out of this nosedive. Rake shrugged, a move as casual as the ship was chaotic. Art's just another form of trade. One man's trash is another alien's treasure. More like one man's trash is another alien's confusing human concept, Drekker muttered, shaking his head. But there was a hint of amusement in his voice, the kind that came from years of following Rake's harebrained schemes. Drulkhan, ever the observer, chimed in, his voice a curious blend of skepticism and intrigue. You propose trading these representations of human culture? Is there truly value in such abstractions? Rake turned to him, nodding like a man who'd just invented sliced bread. More than you know, Drill. In fact, I reckon there's a whole untapped market out there just begging for a taste of Earth's finest. Drekker rolled his eyes, hands flying over the console with the dexterity of a man trying to defuse a bomb. Yeah, because what every alien civilization needs is a collection of broken dreams and failed art degrees. Who's to say they won't appreciate it? Rake replied, undeterred. Everyone loves a good underdog story. Drulkhan blinked twice, his alien mind struggling to comprehend the latest human absurdity. And these expressions, they can be replicated. That's the beauty of it, Rake said, pulling a battered datapad from his pocket. He waved it like a magician revealing a card trick. All it takes is a bit of tech and a lot of imagination. We've got both in spades. Drekker snorted, his fingers never ceasing their dance. Tech, sure. Imagination, more like desperation. Rake ignored the jab, tapping the datapad with a flourish. Drill, your pal's still interested in human innovations? Drulkhan seemed to mull this over, his gaze drifting back to his own datapad. They are, intrigued by the unconventional. Your methods often defy logic, which some find appealing. Great, Rake declared, as if the matter were settled. Let's offer them a slice of Earth. Art, music, maybe even a few recipes if they're feeling adventurous. Drekker raised a brow, skepticism etched into his features. We're going to trade recipes? What next? A bake sale in the Andromeda Nebula? Why not? Rake shot back, unfazed. Everyone loves cookies. Drulkhan scribbled something on his datapad, his curiosity piqued despite himself. This could indeed be a novel approach. However, such trade must be documented and approved by relevant interstellar authorities. Rake waved him off. Details. Let's worry about the red tape after we seal the deal. Drekker leaned back, a wry smile tugging at his lips. And what if this blows up in our faces? Then at least it'll be an interesting explosion, Rake replied, with the kind of bravado that only truly reckless captains could muster. Their conversation was interrupted by a series of violent shudders from the ship. The ever so slightly reliable was acting up again, the way a petulant child might throw a tantrum at the worst possible moment. Looks like the old girl's jealous, Drekker remarked, compensating for the ship's latest antics with practiced ease. She'll come around, Rake assured, patting the console as if soothing a skittish animal. Wouldn't be the first time she's tried to bite the hand that pilots her. Drulkhan's alien features twisted into something that might have been amusement or indigestion. Your bond with this vessel is peculiar. More like codependent, Drekker corrected, a grin tugging at his lips. But hey, whatever keeps us from imploding. Rake glanced at the nav screen, plotting their next move with the kind of reckless optimism that had become his trademark. Alright, let's get this show on the road. Drill, reach out to your contacts. Drecker, keep her steady. We've got some art to sell. Because nothing screams interstellar trade empire like hawking finger paintings, Drecker deadpanned, but there was a glint of mischief in his eyes that suggested even he was beginning to warm to the idea. Drulkarn's fingers danced over his datapad, sending out a series of encrypted messages to his contacts. His alien mind worked overtime to quantify the potential of human art as a commodity. I must admit, this is an unforeseen avenue of trade. That's the beauty of humanity, Rake said, leaning back with that infuriatingly infectious confidence. We're full of surprises. The ship groaned in agreement, or perhaps protest, once more, the sound reverberating through the hull like a cosmic laugh track. As the ever so slightly reliable continued its journey through the stars, the crew embraced the chaos with open arms and wry grins. Because in a universe where everything seemed doomed to fail, sometimes all you could do was laugh at the absurdity and make the most of whatever weird opportunity came your way. Here's to art, Rake toasted, raising another imaginary glass. And to the fools who believe in it. Fools like us, Drecker added, raising his own invisible glass with a smirk. Drulkarn watched the exchange with a mixture of confusion and reluctant admiration. Perhaps there is value in such folly. With their course set and their destination uncertain, the crew of the ever so slightly reliable plunged headlong into the unknown, ready to trade hope, loyalty, and a touch of human madness for survival. And amidst the chaos, there was a spark, a glimmer of something intangible and invaluable, the unyielding spirit of a crew that refused to bow to the odds. In that moment, the universe seemed a little less indifferent, as if acknowledging the defiance of those who dared to dream amidst the stars. Because if you couldn't find meaning in madness, what was the point of it all? A sudden alert dragged them back to reality, the console lights flashing like a disco stuck on a single track. Drecker's fingers flew to the controls, eyes narrowing. Incoming message. Looks like someone bit the bait. Rake leaned in, a grin spreading across his face like wildfire. Patch it through. Let's see what our alien art critics have to say. Drulkarn activated the comms with a flick of his claw, the broadcast crackling to life. The voice on the other end was alien, but the interest was unmistakable. We have received your offer. This, art, intrigues us. Rake exchanged a triumphant glance with Drecker, his grin widening. See, what did I tell you? Everyone loves a good story. The alien continued, its tone calculated yet curious. We propose an exchange. Knowledge for culture. A fair trade in your terms. Drulkarn turned to Rake, his expression a mix of surprise and satisfaction. It seems your gamble may indeed prove profitable. Drecker smirked, fingers dancing over the controls like a maestro conducting an interstellar symphony. Looks like we're in business. Rake nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. All right, let's seal the deal. Drill, you're our liaison on this one. Make sure they get the full human experience. Drulkarn inclined his head, a gesture that had become second nature to him. I shall ensure successful negotiations. As the alien and human worlds prepared to collide over the unpredictable medium of art, Rake couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. Against all odds, they'd found a new way forward, a flicker of hope in a universe that seemed hell-bent on snuffing it out. Because in the end, it wasn't just about survival, it was about thriving in spite of it. The ship groaned once more, as if offering its own reluctant blessing, and the crew braced themselves for whatever madness awaited them in this latest chapter of their cosmic escapades. With luck, imagination, and an endless supply of gallows humor, they might just pull this off. And if not, well, at least they'd go down in history as the crew who gambled everything on a smile, a handshake, and a piece of art. In the grand scheme of the cosmos, that was something worth trading for. The ever so slightly reliable flitted through space like a drunk mosquito, erratic but somehow still airborne. Rake Thalor lounged in the captain's chair, looking as relaxed as a man sitting atop a powder keg could be. He studied the shimmering void outside the viewport, an endless black canvas peppered with stars that seemed to mock his existence. Looks like the neighborhood's getting crowded, Drecker said, fingers dancing over the console with the grace of a pianist at a demolition derby. Rake squinted at the display. A dozen alien ships loomed on the edges of the nav screen, all converging on their little rogue planet like vultures to a fresh corpse. Ah, the welcoming committee. Let's hope they brought fruit baskets. More like death rays, Drecker muttered. Seems they're not thrilled about our art trade. Rake shrugged, a gesture of indifference in the face of potential annihilation. Everyone's a critic. Drulkarn hovered nearby, his alien eyes flicking between the humans with a blend of curiosity and something resembling pity. Why do they fear your artistic endeavors? Is not culture a bridge between worlds? More like a booby-trapped footbridge, Rake replied. Turns out, when you start making a profit off your own species' existential crises, people, or, aliens, get twitchy. Drekker snorted, not looking up from his work. They're just mad they didn't think of it first. The comms panel flashed, promising the usual mix of threats and ultimatums. Rake tapped it with the mild interest of a man checking his voicemail. A cold, metallic voice filled the cockpit, dripping with authority and disdain. This is Commander Vorthrax of the Xylidian Confederation. Cease your operations immediately and prepare for boarding. Rake leaned back, crossing his arms with the air of someone who'd been interrupted during a particularly good daydream. Commander Vorthrax, this is Captain Rake Thalor of the ever so slightly reliable. Sorry, but we're a bit tied up at the moment. Can I take a message? Vorthrax's response was ice cold. Failure to comply will result in immediate disintegration. Charming fellow, Drekker remarked. Bet he's a real hit at parties. Rake switched off the comms with a flourish. All right, team, looks like our guests are getting antsy. Drill, any chance your pals can smooth this over? Drill Khan tapped his datapad, considering the question. My contacts are intrigued by your offerings but lack influence over military matters. They advise, caution. Cautions for people with options, Rake retorted, a mischievous glint in his eye. We're in this for the long haul. Or the short, fiery end, Drekker added helpfully. Rake ignored him, focusing instead on the encroaching blockade. We're not backing down. If anything, this just proves we've hit a nerve. And when you hit a nerve, you keep prodding until something breaks. Preferably not us, Drekker muttered, steadying the ship as it shuddered, a reminder that their trusty vessel had about as much structural integrity as a paper bag in a rainstorm. Any ideas on how we're supposed to explain this art thing to the heavily armed fleet outside? Drekker asked, eyes flitting between the controls and the ominous blips on the screen. Rake drummed his fingers on the armrest, the picture of calm under pressure. We tell them the truth. Sort of. Love a plan with wiggle room, Drekker deadpanned. Care to elaborate? We spin it, Rake said, his mind whirring with possibilities. Tell them our art's a form of cultural exchange. A bridge, like Drill said, but with a toll booth where we stand to make a killing. Literally, Drekker suggested, as another ship pinged on their radar like a bad penny. Rake grinned. Hope springs eternal. Drill Khan's alien features twisted in contemplation. I shall relay your intentions. Perhaps they will see the value in cultural enrichment. Or at least not vaporize us immediately, Drekker said, fingers playing the console like a concerto of impending doom. Rake watched as Drill Khan sent another flurry of encrypted messages, his alien brain working overtime. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, a mix of anticipation and dread that lingered like stale air. Outside, the blockade grew tighter, a noose around their little slice of chaos. Looks like we're going to have company, Drekker said, monitoring the approach of several ships. Hope you've got a hell of a sales pitch, Rake. Rake flashed a grin that could melt lead. Never leave home without one. The ever so slightly reliable trembled as the first of the Xylidian ships closed the gap, a hulking mass of metal and menace that dwarfed their own vessel. The comms crackled back to life, the stern voice of Commander Vorthrax demanding their immediate compliance. Drekker, open a channel, Rake ordered, settling into his role as interstellar snake oil salesman. Time to see if we can't charm our way out of this. Drekker complied, his expression a mix of skepticism and grudging admiration. The comms panel lit up, and Rake cleared his throat, adopting a tone of exaggerated sincerity. Commander Vorthrax, a pleasure to finally speak with you directly. I understand there's been some concern about our recent activities. Your defiance has been noted, Vorthrax replied, his voice the auditory equivalent of a cold shower. You will explain your actions immediately. Rake's grin widened, the picture of a man with nothing to lose. Of course, Commander. You see, what we're doing here is nothing short of revolutionary. We're offering a glimpse into the soul of humanity, a chance for true understanding between our peoples. A chance for profit, you mean? Vorthrax shot back, unimpressed. Well, that too, Rake conceded, with a wink Drekker could practically feel from across the cockpit. But really, isn't that the beauty of it? Culture and commerce, hand in hand. Your actions threaten the stability of interstellar trade, Vorthrax warned, his tone like a scalpel. We demand cessation of all activities and surrender. Rake leaned back, unruffled. Commander, I assure you, what we're offering is something more valuable than any conventional trade. Hope, loyalty, a chance to learn from each other. Isn't that worth a little chaos? Your perspective is unique, Vorthrax admitted grudgingly. But our patience is finite. That's all right, Rake replied, his confidence unbroken. We're not planning on sticking around for long anyway. The comms went silent, Vorthrax clearly weighing his options. The tension stretched, a taut wire ready to snap, as Rake and his crew awaited the verdict. You've got a death wish, Rake, Drekker muttered, though his fingers never stopped their orchestrated dance. More like a life wish, Rake corrected, eyes twinkling with mischief. Just trying to make it an interesting one. Drul Khan's datapad chimed, the alien's eyes flicking downward. My contacts report growing interest from the Xylidian Council. There may yet be a chance for negotiation. See, Rake said, the picture of insufferable optimism. Told you everyone loves a good story. Let's hope they love a happy ending, Drecker replied, adjusting the ship's trajectory as the blockade shifted, leaving a gap just wide enough for the ever so slightly reliable to slip through. Rake's eyes narrowed as he studied the screen. Looks like they're giving us a chance. Let's not waste it. Drul Khan nodded, transmitting their acceptance of the temporary truce. Your methods are unorthodox, he admitted. Yet they appear effective. Not dead yet, Rake quipped, a grin spreading across his face. Which means we're doing something right. The ship groaned in protest as Drecker guided it through the makeshift corridor, a blockade of ships hovering on either side like silent sentinels. The crew held their breath, waiting for the inevitable betrayal, but the passage remained open, a sign that perhaps the universe wasn't entirely devoid of hope. All right, team, Rake said, his voice a rallying cry in the vacuum of space. Let's show them what humanity's made of. Mostly water and bad decisions, Drecker added, a smirk tugging at his lips as he adjusted their course. The ever so slightly reliable slipped past the blockade, a lone ship defying the odds and daring the universe to stop them. In the cockpit, Rake, Drecker, and Drul Khan exchanged a glance that spoke volumes, a mix of camaraderie and defiance in the face of overwhelming odds. Here's to hope, then, Rake toasted, raising another imaginary glass to the stars. To loyalty, Drecker added, his own invisible drink held high. Drul Khan considered the gesture, his alien mind still wrestling with the eccentricities of human behavior. And yet, in that moment, he found himself raising a phantom glass of his own. To madness, he declared, a rare smile curling across his features. As the ship hurtled toward the next leg of their uncertain journey, the crew of the ever so slightly reliable embraced the chaos, their hearts set on carving out a future amidst the stars. Because in a universe that seemed hell-bent on tearing them apart, they were determined to hold fast to the one thing that truly mattered, the unyielding spirit of those who refused to bow to the darkness. Rake Thalor sipped the last of his lukewarm synth coffee, the bitter sludge more reminiscent of battery acid than anything remotely potable. I miss real coffee, he lamented, kicking his feet up on the control panel and staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers to life's persistent irritations. Of all the things Earth had to offer, coffee was the one thing the universe decided to obliterate first. Drecker, hunched over the console like it owed him money, barely glanced up. Well, Captain, maybe if you hadn't traded the last of it for that authentic, Xylidian art piece, which turned out to be a glorified doorstop, Rake cut in, rubbing his temples. Yes, I remember, we've got bigger problems now. Like getting shot for selling abstract sculpture to aliens with more artillery than taste. Drecker suggested, his fingers dancing over the console like it was a piano and he was Beethoven in a particularly bad mood. Precisely, Rake grinned, the gleam in his eyes suggesting a plan was brewing, albeit one that might end with them all as space dust. We need a show, a demonstration that'll knock their alien socks off. If they wear socks, Drecker quipped, adjusting their trajectory once more, the ship wobbling like a drunk on stilts. Drul Khan looked up from his datapad, intrigued despite, or perhaps because of, the perpetual chaos. A demonstration of what? The human propensity for disaster? Something like that, Rake said, tapping his chin with exaggerated thoughtfulness. We've got art, right? We need to show them it's more than just pretty pictures. It's an experience, a cultural explosion. More like cultural implosion, Drecker muttered but didn't stop working his magic on the ship's controls. Rake leaned forward, energy practically crackling off him. Think about it, we stage a live demonstration. We show them art's not just for looking at, it's for feeling. We make them want it, crave it like a man craves coffee when he's drinking what tastes like burnt transmission fluid, Drecker supplied helpfully. Exactly, Drill, you in? Rake turned to the alien, full of enthusiasm and something akin to madness. Drul Khan considered, the logical part of his mind warring with the curious observer who'd signed up for this chaos. I will present the idea to the council. They are curious about human culture, and this might persuade them to reconsider their stance. Great, now we just have to not die before then, Rake said, clapping his hands together. Drecker rolled his eyes, half in exasperation, half in reluctant admiration for Rake's relentless optimism in the face of probable doom. What's the plan, genius? Rake leaned back, a conspiratorial grin stretching across his face. We sell it as an immersive experience. Art, music, the whole shebang. We show them that human art isn't just a trade commodity, it's a bridge to understanding. Or a bridge to being vaporized, Drecker noted. Details, Rake shrugged. Drill, Can you get us an audience? Drul Khan nodded slowly. I will require more than just words to convince them. You will need to demonstrate the value of this experience. Leave that to me, Rake assured him. We'll put on a show they'll never forget. Drekker groaned, already anticipating the logistical nightmare. And what exactly are we using for this masterpiece of performance art? Our collection of second-rate paintings and the one-dented sculpture. Rake tapped the side of his nose. We improvise. We mix everything we've got, sound, light, color, into a sensory overload. We sell them the idea that art is the true currency of the universe. Better hope they don't ask for a refund, Drekker commented dryly. Drul Khan rose, datapad in hand, the glint of curiosity in his eyes. I will inform the council of your intentions. They may find your proposal intriguing. Let's hope they find it more intriguing than threatening, Rake said, getting to his feet. All right, team, we've got a show to prepare. Drekker watched the captain stride out, shaking his head. You know this is insane, right? Since when has sanity ever gotten us anywhere? Rake called back over his shoulder, already disappearing into the corridors of the ever so slightly reliable. The mess hall, repurposed as a makeshift stage, buzzed with a frenetic energy. Drekker and Rake moved through the cramped space like generals preparing for battle. The ship's limited collection of art was scattered about, each piece in varying states of dubious authenticity and questionable taste. Rake gestured grandly at the chaotic tableau. Behold, a symphony of art, or a crime scene, Drekker muttered, adjusting a piece of equipment that looked more like a toaster attached to a disco ball. Rake ignored the comment, eyes alight with a strange mix of hope and insanity. We need music. Something that'll shake 'em up, make them feel the raw power of human creativity. Didn't I tell you not to throw away those old synthwave tapes? They'd be useful someday, Drekker said, rifling through a box of assorted junk. Rake feigned innocence. I prefer to think of it as recycling. What else? Lights, Drekker said. Can't have a show without lights. I'll see what I can rig up from the emergency flares. Perfect. Rake clapped Drekker on the back, nearly sending him face first into a pile of salvaged tech. We're gonna knock their proverbial socks off. If we don't blow up the ship in the process, Drekker grumbled, but there was a spark of excitement in his eyes, despite himself. As they worked, the ship's comm system crackled to life, Drul Khan's voice coming through with a clarity surprising for their aging equipment. The council is intrigued, he announced. They will allow you to present your demonstration. But be warned, success is far from assured. They remain skeptical. Nothing like a little skepticism to spice up a performance, Rake said, adjusting a piece of abstract sculpture so it might look less like a piece of scrap metal. We'll make believers out of them yet. Drul Khan's voice held a note of amusement. I look forward to seeing this demonstration of human artistry. Good luck. Rake hung up, turning to Drekker with the manic grin of someone who'd just bet everything on a single roll of the dice. Ready to make history? History or a mess, not sure which yet, Drekker replied, plugging in a final cable that sent a shower of sparks flying. But let's give them a show they won't forget. They worked in tandem, transforming the mess hall into something resembling a cross between an art gallery and a nightclub designed by someone with a questionable grasp of aesthetics. The lights flickered and pulsed, casting strange shadows over the makeshift stage. The music, a cobbled-together symphony of synthwave and static, filled the space with a haunting rhythm. All right, Rake said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. Let's do this. The alien delegation arrived, a small group of Xylidian council members escorted by Drul Khan. Their expressions were inscrutable, a mix of curiosity and skepticism that seemed permanently etched into their alien features. Rake stepped forward, all charm and confidence, as if welcoming guests to an exclusive gala rather than a last-ditch effort to save their necks. Welcome, esteemed council members. It's an honor to have you with us. One of the Xylidians, a particularly tall one with eyes like polished obsidian, inclined its head. We are interested to see what you humans consider art. Rake's grin widened. You're in for a treat. Drekker, lights. Drekker hit the switches, and the room erupted in a cascade of color and sound. The lights danced and flickered, painting the walls in vivid hues as the music swelled, an unpredictable melody that seemed to reach into the soul. The Xylidians watched, their expressions shifting from impassive to uncertain as the performance unfolded. Rake moved among them, narrating with the flair of a carnival barker. Art is more than what you see. It's what you feel. It's hope, longing, the very essence of humanity distilled into form. The tall Xylidian turned to Drul Khan, their strange, lilting voice barely audible over the cacophony. Is this typical of human culture? Drul Khan, caught between amusement and confusion, nodded. Humans often turn chaos into creation. It is their way. Rake continued, weaving through the tableau of lights and sound. Our art tells stories, bridges divides, reveals the unseen. It's our legacy, our gift to the universe. Drecker, despite himself, found a rhythm in the chaos, his fingers dancing over the controls in sync with the music. You know, Rake, this might just work, he admitted, a note of wonder in his voice. Damn right it will, Rake replied, eyes bright with conviction. We're showing them who we are. The performance reached its crescendo, the lights flashing in time with the pounding rhythm, an explosion of color and sound that enveloped the room. The Xylithians watched, enraptured, their skepticism giving way to something resembling awe. As the final notes faded into silence, Rake stepped forward, breathless but triumphant. And that, dear council members, is what it means to experience human art. The Xylithians conferred among themselves, their strange, musical language a murmur of harmonies. Finally, the tall one spoke, their voice carrying a note of respect. Captain Rake Thalor, your demonstration was enlightening. We must discuss further. Rake's grin was a mile wide, the rush of victory coursing through him. Looking forward to it. As the delegation left, Drul Khan lingered a moment, a rare smile on his lips. I believe you have made an impression, Captain. Only the beginning, my friend, Rake said, clapping Drul Khan on the back. Just wait, till they see what we do next. Drecker leaned back, exhaustion and satisfaction mingling in his expression. Well, I'll be damned. You actually pulled it off. Never doubted it for a second, Rake replied, though the relief in his eyes told another story. Now let's figure out how to top this. Drecker chuckled, a rare sound in their grim journey. One miracle at a time, Captain. Rake nodded, the weight of their uncertain future momentarily lifted. To art, then, he said, raising an imaginary toast once more. To chaos, Drecker replied, clinking his own invisible glass. Drul Khan hesitated, then raised his hand in mimicry of the human gesture. To understanding, he offered, and for a moment, the three of them stood united in their impossible quest, ready to face whatever the universe threw their way. The ever so slightly reliable was living up to its name, shuddering and groaning like an old man getting up from a 3-day bender. Inside, the chaotic aftermath of the impromptu art demonstration was still settling. Rake Thalor leaned against a bulkhead, sweat-drenched and heart-pounding like he'd just tangoed with a supernova. Hell of a show, Drecker said, collapsing into a nearby chair that protested with a squeal. I was half expecting we'd have to sell the ship's hull to pay for damages, but looks like they didn't ask for a refund. Rake ran a hand through his hair, bunching up the sweat-drenched locks in a manner that suggested he'd just stepped out of a particularly violent wind tunnel. Guess those Xylithians aren't as immune to a good bit of chaos as they thought. Drul Khan hovered nearby, scribbling furiously on his datapad. Your capacity to turn madness into something resembling art is unique, Captain. Yeah, well, never underestimate the power of desperation, Rake replied, flashing his usual manic grin. And hey, if this whole trade thing falls through, maybe we'll open a gallery. Or a circus, Drecker muttered, eyes closing as if sleep might be a viable escape from the insanity. Rake pushed himself off the bulkhead, feeling a rare surge of hope, a commodity as rare as real coffee these days. We've got them talking, now we just need to drive it home. Drul Khan paused his notes, one eyebrow arched in that way only a Xylithian could manage. You believe this will convince them to lift the blockade? Rake chuckled, a sound laced with more bravado than certainty. You ever seen an alien try to resist the allure of human culture? They're curious bastards, hooked like a kid in a candy store. Assuming they don't get indigestion, Drecker added, not bothering to open his eyes. Or decide with a side dish. Drul Khan considered this, his gaze contemplative. They are intrigued, certainly. Your art seems to affect them on a level beyond simple trade metrics. It's emotional. Emotion, Rake said, pacing the cramped space. That's the ticket. We make them feel something, anything. They're used to numbers, logic. Give them something messy, something human, and they won't know what hit them. Or they'll hit us, Drecker mumbled, turning his head to peer at the captain. Ever consider we might be giving him a bit too much of the human experience? Rake shot him a grin that was all teeth. I'll risk it. Better to burn out in a blaze of illogical glory than fade away as another forgotten statistic. Drul Khan set down his datapad, the hint of a smile on his lips. There is an appeal to such reckless optimism, he admitted. Perhaps it is time the Xylithians learned not everything is calculable. Rake slapped him on the back, earning a surprised look from the alien. Now you're getting it. All right, team, let's get ready to follow up on this while we've got their attention. Drecker groaned as he pushed himself to his feet. More chaos it is, then. Let's just hope the ship holds together long enough for us to try Plan B. Plan B? Drul Khan asked, curious. Yeah, Drecker said, heading for the console. Run like hell. Asterisk asterisk the Xylithian council chambers were as sterile and orderly as you'd expect from a species that thought emotions were a quaint human folly. Rake stood in the center, the eyes of the council members on him like a bunch of disapproving parents watching their kid's first school play. Only here, a failing grade meant more than a stern talking to. Captain Thalor, began the head of the council, a particularly severe-looking Xylithian whose expression suggested they'd never encountered a smile that hadn't fled in terror. You have entertained us. Glad you caught the show, Rake said, managing not to visibly sweat as he faced the panel. It was our pleasure to share a piece of human culture with you. Culture, the council head repeated, as if tasting the word for the first time. And you believe this culture is a suitable foundation for trade? More than that, Rake replied, stepping forward. It's the cornerstone. You've been looking at trade as an exchange of goods, numbers, equations. Useful, sure, but limited. Humanity offers something different: art, music, stories. We offer the unpredictable, the emotional, the very things that make life anything but dull. There was a murmur among the council, their language a symphony of discordant notes. Rake could only hope they were humming in tune to his pitch. Emotion, the head said again, their tone skeptical but curious. This is your commodity? In a way, Rake said, nodding. Think of it like spice. You can live on bread and water, but a little seasoning makes life worth savoring. Humanity's the spice rack of the universe. Drekker's voice crackled over Rake's earpiece, muffled and sardonic. Spice rack, huh? They buying it? Rake resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Working on it, he muttered, keeping his attention on the council. It is an intriguing proposition, the council head admitted, their stern facade cracking ever so slightly. Yet we must deliberate further. Take your time, Rake said, spreading his arms wide in a gesture of magnanimous patience. We're not going anywhere. Assuming the ship doesn't disintegrate, Drekker added through the comms, as ever the voice of gloomy realism. The council members conferred in hushed tones, their language a melodious counterpoint to the tense silence that filled the chamber. Rake waited, each second ticking by like a particularly slow form of torture. Finally, the head turned back to him, their expression softened by a touch of what might have been amusement. Your proposal is unorthodox, Captain. Yet we find ourselves intrigued by the potential. Glad to hear it, Rake said, flashing them his best, trust me, I won't crash the car, smile. We will lift the blockade, the head continued, their voice firm. On the condition that this cultural exchange becomes a regular aspect of our trade relations. Done, Rake said without hesitation. I can guarantee the best and weirdest humanity has to offer. Drekker's voice came through the earpiece, dry as the desert. Hope you've got a plan for that, Captain. We're running low on weird. Never underestimate our capacity for strange, Rake replied, keeping his voice low. We'll manage. Drulkhan stepped forward, bowing slightly. The Council appreciates your willingness to share your culture with us, Captain. It is a bold step. Not my first, won't be my last, Rake said, shaking Drulkhan's hand. The Xylithian observer mimicked the gesture, still visibly unsure about the whole hand-shaking business. Then let us proceed, the council head said, rising from their seat. We look forward to this new chapter in our relations. As Rake and his crew were escorted out, he could hardly believe their luck. The ever so slightly reliable had dodged another bullet, and they'd managed to turn human art into a legitimate trade commodity, something no one had seen coming, least of all him. Captain, Drulkhan said as they walked, his tone thoughtful. I must admit, your species never ceases to surprise me. That's kind of our thing, Rake said, grinning. Stick around and you'll see it's not just a fluke. Drekker walked alongside them, a skeptical eyebrow raised. So what's the next move, Captain? We've got a bunch of aliens hooked on our cultural oddities. How do we keep this circus rolling? Rake shrugged, his grin as irrepressible as a weed. Same way we always do, Drekker. By the seat of our pants. Sounds about right, Drekker said, shaking his head with a mixture of exasperation and admiration. Drulkhan, for his part, seemed genuinely intrigued by the whole ordeal. I look forward to seeing where this journey takes us. So do I, Rake said, and for once, he meant it. Now, let's get back to the ship before it decides to fall apart without us there to hold it together. As they made their way back, Rake couldn't help but feel a strange mix of triumph and relief. They'd done it. They'd convinced the Xylithians of the value of human culture, and in doing so, they'd carved out a new path in the galaxy. It was a start, and sometimes, a start was all you needed. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to bring back real coffee. He allowed himself that bit of hope. After all, if they could pull off this miracle, who was to say the universe didn't have a few more tricks up its sleeve? Here's to the weird and wonderful, Rake said, raising an imaginary toast as they reached the ever so slightly reliable. To chaos, Drekker replied, following suit. Drulkhan hesitated, then joined in with a small smile. To understanding. And as they stepped onto the ship, Rake knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, humans, aliens, and everything in between, united in the grand, messy, beautiful chaos of it all. The ever so slightly reliable creaked like an old man's knees as it drifted through the void, somehow held together by duct tape, spit, and a misplaced sense of optimism. Rake Thalor stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the vast blackness of space that stretched endlessly ahead, a canvas where even the stars seemed to conspire in their lethargy. "Well, that went better than expected," Rake said, his voice laced with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We left with our skins intact and even managed to pull off a deal. Not bad for a day's work." Drecker, the ship's resident cynic, leaned against the console with the kind of languid grace that suggested he'd spent a lifetime perfecting the art of looking unimpressed. "Yeah, don't go jinxing it, Captain. The universe has a habit of kicking us in the teeth right when we start feeling cocky." "That's the spirit," Rake replied, flashing a sardonic grin. "Always the optimist." Drulkhan, the Xylythian observer-turned-ally, stood nearby, his ever-present datapad in hand. He'd taken to recording everything with an enthusiasm that bordered on obsession. "I must admit, Captain, your ability to navigate these negotiations was unexpected." "Unexpected? That's just fancy talk for, you didn't screw it up as badly as I thought," Rake quipped. Drulkhan's lips twitched into what might have passed for a smile. "Precisely. So, what's next?" Drecker asked, his gaze shifting from the blinking lights of the console to Rake. "We convinced the Xylythians that human culture is worth something. How do we capitalize on it without getting ourselves vaporized in the process?" "Easy," Rake said, leaning back with the air of a man who'd just cheated death and was feeling pretty damn good about it. "We rebuild, strengthen our trade routes, use this new, cultural exchange, as leverage. We offer them art, stories, music, whatever tickles their fancy. In return, we get access to their resources, their markets. Everyone wins. And if they change their minds and decide they'd rather roast us over a star than trade with us?" Drecker shot back, ever the voice of doom and gloom. "Then we run like hell and hope the ever so slightly reliable lives up to its name for once," Rake answered with a shrug. "But let's not borrow trouble. We've got enough on our plate as it is." Drulkhan's gaze flicked between the two humans, curiosity evident in his eyes. "I am intrigued by your species' resilience. You seem to thrive on adversity." "It's a human specialty," Rake said with a wry smile. "We like to call it, making the best of a bad situation. Or, charging blindly into the abyss and hoping for the best," Drecker added, his tone dry. "Either way, it's worked for us so far," Rake said, his eyes glinting with an irrepressible spark of mischief. "And as long as we're still breathing, there's always hope." "Hope," Drulkhan repeated, the word rolling off his tongue as if it were a foreign delicacy. "Is that what drives you?" "Hope, desperation, sheer bloody-mindedness," Rake replied. "Take your pick. We're not picky." Drecker chuckled, shaking his head. "It's a miracle we haven't blown ourselves to bits yet." "Give it time," Rake said, clapping him on the back. "Let's get back to work, shall we? We've got a galaxy to charm, and I'm fresh out of charisma." The crew got down to business, each member slipping into their roles with the kind of practiced ease that comes from living on the edge for too long. Drecker set to work on the console, fingers flying over the controls with a speed that belied his languid demeanor. Drulkhan continued to observe, taking notes with the precision of a scientist cataloging a particularly fascinating specimen. And Rake, he did what he did best, he improvised. The ship might have been held together by little more than wishful thinking, but it was his ship, his crew, and damn if he wasn't going to make the most of it. "Captain," Drulkhan said after a while, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled over the bridge. "I would like to study your economic systems further. This concept of cultural trade is intriguing." "Knock yourself out," Rake replied, gesturing expansively. "Our economic systems are as messy as everything else about us, but if you can make sense of them, more power to you." Drulkhan nodded, his fingers a blur as he jotted down notes. "Your willingness to adapt is commendable. Many species resist change, but you seem to embrace it." "It's called making do with what you've got," Drecker interjected, not looking up from his work. "It's a survival trait, like having a thick skull. Or a thick skin," Rake added, grinning. "We've got both in spades." As they talked, the ever so slightly reliable continued its journey through the stars, a tiny, battered speck in an endless sea of darkness. Yet within its creaking hull, hope flickered like a stubborn flame, refusing to be snuffed out by the vacuum of space or the weight of cynicism. It was a fragile thing, hope, easily crushed, easily lost. But for now, it burned bright, casting a warm glow over the crew as they set about rebuilding their future, one improbable step at a time. Here's to the next chapter, Rake said, raising an imaginary glass in a toast. May it be just as chaotic as the last, Drecker replied, mirroring the gesture. Drulkhan hesitated, then joined in with a bemused smile. To cooperation. And as they set course for the next adventure, Rake knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together, united by the strange, wonderful chaos that was life aboard the ever so slightly reliable